Look, I'm rocking the Fog Mjolnir shirt right now. Like, that's what I'm wearing because this thing is comfy. The sleeves fit just right. It makes my tiny noodle arms look a little bit jacked, which is kind of like my gold standard for any t-shirt. That's what I want. Yesterday, I for the same reason, I rocked the Fog of War shirt. Those are both available now at fogapparel.com. So much cool stuff, man. My personal favorite design-wise is the Dia de los Fog. Look, I live in South Texas. There's a lot of Mexican culture, a lot of Hispanic culture down here. Dia de los Muertos is a big part of it, and I'm just a big fan of that aesthetic, and I love that they captured that. Lots of cool designs, super comfy stuff. You got girth, you're into this stuff, you're into powerlifting, Highland Games, strongman, you're in this world. You need to go to fogapparel.com. Use code HEAVYLIGHT, all one word. That's going to save you some cash on your next purchase. So here's a big, broad question that's probably more than one podcast worth and would be smarter if I had other people with other perspectives. But oh well, you get me yet again. What is the future of the Highland Games? What is the future of the Highland Games? And who cares? Where does this sport go? Because this is not a future-directed sport. I think, like I've said before, we should be honest about that this is a revival sport. This is sort of a recreation sport. This is a little bit of a LARPing sport. It's not a future-looking, it's not a forward-looking sport. It's not innovation at least in the terms of how it's competed, how it's played, is not going to change, nor should it, because we have tradition as kind of the backbone of why we're doing this. This is a traditional sport. This is the precursor of track and field. This is there's not even a really good analog, honestly. This is sort of like how, I'm speaking from my own experience, how Olympic fencing exists and it's pretty technologically dependent, but if you kind of scale back and go smaller, you have HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts, who do competitions, but those are more steeped in tradition. Technology, advancement, media presence, all those things, are not going to play as well with something that is that steeped in tradition. And we're kind of in that world, and oddly enough, we end up performing at the same places at festivals. So where does the future lie? Where can you go with this sport from now? So we're on the cusp of the Arnold Sports Festival. I'm headed there next week. I will be announcing the pro class with my throw bro, Aaron George, my business partner in Throw Bros, Aaron George. And then on Saturday, I'll be competing in the lightweight class in the hall at the big show. It'll be super, super fun. I'm really looking forward to, being out there in front of the crowd, putting on a show, seeing my throwing buddies, all that kind of good stuff. Seeing as many of you that make it out to come say hi, I think that would be awesome. So really looking forward to that. And I think that's worth mentioning because since my time as when I was the executive director of TCAA, the Texas Celtic Athletic Association, my big push had always been that if you want to have any growth and you want to have more eyes, you need to get away from a strict festival model. Festivals, don't get it twisted, festivals are the backbone and they should continue to be because that's where these things should be held because that's where, that's tied to the tradition. And we should always, at the big festivals, the big games, should always have the athletics as a centerpiece, if not one of the centerpieces. If you have a good athletic competition along with pipe bands, along with the dancers, along with any other demos that are appropriate or that fit for that crowd, you should have it there. That's where we should be primarily. But if you want to think about a model that grows and hits more eyes, things like the Arnold are so important. And people ask, when we talk private, we talk, the business model side of things. And look, we ask ourselves this commonly, why would Throw Bros continue to give money, time, and effort to the Arnold Sports Festival when there's so many other events out there that, could be sponsored, that we could lend our support to. And we do occasionally, but, that's the one where we probably expend the most effort. And just on a dollar per dollar basis, we spend the most. I'll just put it out there. We do. We spend the most getting out there and getting our name out there. And it is that reason that I think if you want to display the athleticism in this sport and you want to display the spectacle of this sport, as I've talked about extensively, if you want to display that as the other strength sports do, the spectacle of it, that's the place. Places like that are it. And it is the place. And it's amazing to me, good on, Bill Crawford and Steve Conway on getting a pro Highland Games event and then eventually getting amateurs out there. And, there, I don't know if you remember this, if you haven't been on the sport long enough, but there was sort of a sputtering start with Highland Games at the Arnold in that, where was it? It was sometime in the early 2010s that they had an outdoor Arnold Highland Games in March in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know how familiar with Ohio you are. I lived there for 3 years. March is not exactly a beautiful time of year, and often it's snowing outside. And what do you know? It did snow outside during, I think, both iterations of the 2 years that they did it outdoors. And they did it really far from the expo. It was like in downtown Columbus. It's a nice field, a beautiful field. I've seen it, but it's just far away from the spectacle. And all the other spectacle, let's put it that way, far away from the expo. So, it was awesome. The great athletes, some of the best in the world went out there. They had pro event, they even had AMs one year. It's awesome that they did it, but I think the formula, the mix wasn't quite right, and it wasn't the right bang for the buck. But the ability to modify this into an indoor games and put this on, the Great Lakes Scottish Association did a lot of legwork in doing that. I know Steve and Bill did also, to bring it indoors, to get that huge space, relatively speaking. And look, I'm coming from the place where I have paid for space, through Hate Brand Goods, through Throw Bros. I paid for space at the Arnold. I know how much each square foot is worth, and having that much space over there, kudos to Rogue for stepping up to do that, to finance a lot of that, and to help with the financing of the space, to get that room for us to compete in a sport that throws distance events. Nobody else really does that. Like, nobody's saying like, hey, let's get the best discus throwers in the world out here and see what they can do. So the fact that we can do that is huge. And I think events like that and I guess what I was going back to was, it's amazing that we've gotten that the top tier, like the number one expo, basically the String Sports and Sports Expo, that we got into that one. It's a credit to the people that worked to get there, because my thought was we were going to have to start smaller. You're going to have to do like regional sports festivals. Like in Texas, we did one called the Show of Strength that's based on a bodybuilding gym in North Texas. We did that for a few years to put on a team event there. We were looking at doing the Branch Warren Invitational, trying to find room out there. We thought maybe doing those kind of shows, like the Ronnie Coleman Expo, maybe LA Fit at some point. Like, we were talking about how to bring the games into these, and it's difficult. There's one here, what's it called? Austin Simply Fit, or I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Certainly, yeah, for sure stick on that point for like a minute though, Mike. But there was one in Austin. We were trying to do all these where we're trying to get in these regional shows, but the people that did the legwork in Columbus got us in on the biggest stage. They got it so, Rogue is pointing cameras at us and putting us up on YouTube, and that we have stands full of crowds screaming for us. And it's huge. And you have to understand the impact of that. You can't just count number of fans, because yes, there are festivals where there are more people cheering, for sure. But the people that are at those festivals, the Scottish festivals, the Celtic festivals, the Highland Games, the full event, they are there because we've already kind of captured them. We've got them already. Those are already people that know what they're getting. They're buying a ticket to a Celtic festival, to a Highland Games. They know what's coming. So they're getting kind of what they expected, but we're not like breaking into new demographics when we do that. With the Arnold, we are. There are people that walk through, and you gotta the places where the place where we've done the Highland Games traditionally. It's going to be two places now, a pro and an amateur event. But the area where we've done it is prime real estate, because it's right by an entrance, and it's right at kind of like a main artery where people travel. And during Friday, Saturday, especially, the mid morning to afternoon, it's nuts to butts walking by there. So people are going to watch what's going on. So we capture a lot of new audience, and a lot of people come sit in the stands, because if you've ever been to an expo or anything like that, finding a place to sit is really nice, because you're on your feet a lot. It takes, to get from one side of that expo hall to the other when it's crowded, is at least 30 minutes just wading through humanity. And finding a place to sit down is pretty rad. And people do. They come to the stands and they sit and they watch, and they get to ask questions. And if there's a good announcer on the microphone at the time, a lot of those questions get answered. A lot of information is given. If the athletes are able to engage and put on a good show of what they're doing, then we gain fans. We gain people. Are there going to be people that like, oh man, I'm going to spend all my expendable income traveling the world to watch, Scottish Highland Games? No. But you have some people that when they come across it again, or they see that it's going to be in town, they're now an advocate. that they can say, oh, you know what? There's one of those festivals in Dublin, Ohio. I saw some of those dudes. I even know this guy. I saw him throw. Like, we should go watch. We should go get fucking drunk. We should just hang out at the festival all day, and like we can watch these guys throw heavy shit. And then maybe the one dude in the group of friends is like, hey, you know what? I lift weights, or I threw track in high school or whatever. Maybe that's something I could do. Boom, we gain a new athlete. So that's why those kind of events are so important, that it's reaching out to a new demo. That's an industry term for demographic, guys. Demo. That we reach out to a new group of people that we might have otherwise not gotten. So that's why I put so much emphasis on, we need to, as a community, lift up what happens at the Arnold Sports Festival, especially the pros, especially the pro men and women this year. We need to have the best on display. Now, the amateurs that are throwing there, I'm one of them. I feel like they've Great Lakes put together a great spate of competitors that everybody's going to look like they know what they're doing. We're not going to have any outliers. They do a good job selecting the field, and I think it's smart that they do. It's a mix of rankings and selection that go into it also, because I would imagine, I'm not in the back room, doing the dealings with Great Lakes, figuring out who he goes, but you have to understand in some of these games that numbers do matter, but also who you are and the kind of show you put on does matter a little bit. And representing the sport well is a big part of that. That's a big digression. I don't really know that. I'm conjecturing about a lot of that. I'm just happy that I got invited. I'm happy that I didn't piss off enough people to where I didn't get invited, because as we can tell, it's certainly a possibility. Now, that kind of leads me into the next point about what the future of the sport is. There is a generation gap that Chad Clark talked. Why do I always get his name wrong on here? That Chad Clark talked about. Like, who is the next generation of athletic directors? Because we have a lot of older, to be perfectly honest, like baby boomer generation, maybe older Gen X people, but if you believe in those sort of splits, but I mean, it's a good year. It's a good way to delineate the years, but you have a lot of ADs over the age of 50, let's put it that way. And eventually these guys are going to get tired, or they're not going to be into it enough, or they're going to move on to other things or to other planes of existence, I guess. And there's going to be a gaping hole in these games. And as we've seen, all it takes for a festival to fall apart is 1 year of bad weather sometimes. So even more than that, all it takes for the athletics part of it to fall apart and that line budget item in the festival budget to be struck is just for 1 year for it to fail, to not have anybody that knows what they're doing out there. And we're really facing that. I think we're already seeing it in some places that I think the current, and this, I understand this may be controversial, but I think, that's ever stopped me. Like, is there some point I'm going to say that and then just not say the next sentence? Ooh, shouldn't say that. I think in some ways the paid pro model of bringing in pros is starting to dry up because the money's drying up in some places. Two reasons. The athletic directors are aging out, but also the people that are running the clans, who are the driving force behind the finances and the organization behind this a lot of times, they're starting to age out. There's not a lot of people in my age bracket that are taking over clan tents, that are taking over the organization of clans and doing that traditional stuff that pays into that. And I think you have to look at that. Where's the next generation going to come from? There are some people in my generation, my age bracket again, that are stepping up to be athletic directors. Kudos to them. Marcelo DeRosso, who's been on my other podcast, Now You Try. He's a great example of somebody who stepped into the role and is relishing it and doing well at it. And I think you're seeing more people that are doing that. Like, Chad Clark's another example. He's somebody that's really putting in his time, putting in the effort to do this kind of stuff. But it's not a nationwide thing. It's not even a worldwide thing. So, but I think that model of there being money to bring in the top pros is starting to dry up. I think you're going to see the number of pro games where they can pay for travel and afford to pay the pros is going to start shrinking as these games start to shrink, as the fundraising tends to dry up. One of the things that the Celtic Classic in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania does really well is they fundraise year round, and they have big sponsors and they have relationships with them. They have a full-time person that does account management and handles development of those gifts for the games. That is a big deal. Can every games afford that? No. Not at first. But when you start developing those gifts and you develop, as I mentioned in the sponsorship podcast, when you develop an ROI, when you can show, your local, like beer distributor, your local, Bud, Anheuser-Busch distributor, you show your local Coca-Cola bottling company, or you show the local brewery, whoever it is your sponsor, you show them, hey, here's the ROI that other people got on this in a professional way. You can show them, here's the number of eyes you're going to get, here's your potential ROI, here's your upside. Then I think it becomes something where they become invested, and all of a sudden maybe that role starts paying for itself. That development person role starts paying for itself. So that's something that I think everybody that's maybe that new generation of athletic directors or festival committee people are going to have to start looking at. But you also have to ask the culture question. You have to ask, because if I'm honest with myself, I never got into the Highland Games for the tradition of it. I did not. I was not inherently fascinated at first with the cultural side of it, the Celtic cultural side of it. It's not a strong part of my identity. It's not why I did it. I did it because I wanted to play a sport, and I found a sport that I could play, and the people would let me play, and the people would cheer for me. And that's why I found it. And I think a lot of the athletes coming to this sport are doing it for that reason. They're not doing it as a celebration of their cultural heritage. Some are. I'm not saying some of you are not, because I'm sure there'll be the next set of comments on this episode will be like, well, I did it because, my last name's McLeod or whatever. And shout out to Hamish McLeod. And that's cool. It's good, but I just don't think it's the majority. I don't think that's why most people are getting into it. And when you lack that connection, you can really see why is somebody that cares about the games going to take over a clan tent? Why are they going to take over operations of a local chapter of a clan? Why are they going to do that? Just because your last name's Wallace, do you feel like you need to do that? But I think that's maybe a generational thing. And I think, wanes and waxes across generations. And again, I say this because I know that there are people out there that are doing that, but I just think the numbers of people that are continuing those traditions are starting to dwindle. And that kind of goes back to that next generation of athletic director should be even more active in diversifying where we're seen. Now, is there a limit? Yeah, unfortunately there is. This is not the kind of sport that's going to travel everywhere. You're going to have a great audience for it. But I think strength and fitness expos are a fantastic start. I think it's a really good place to go. My wife had a fantastic idea the other day. And, there are now cropping up, even one just down the road from us in Georgetown, there are whiskey festivals. There are Scotch festivals. You can't tell me that if they can afford to have, and I'm not lying here, Post Malone, who come out and perform at that whiskey festival in a town down the road from Austin, you can't tell me they don't have money to have a games going. So, I don't know, new generation of guys, think about that. We all think about craft breweries because they're always, kind of on the edge of trying to market find new, niches to get into, and good on them for that. They're a great source of sponsorship funds, at least in the short term. But start thinking about those whiskey festivals. Start thinking about those kind of things. And then you could go throw while Post Malone is playing. And then if I could give you a good example of a Post Malone song, I would sing it right here while talking about throwing. I can't think of one right now. I'm sure my kids actually met him in Salt Lake City, Utah. If you feel like digging through my Instagram from last summer, you can see my kids met him in Salt Lake City, Utah. A little aside there. They didn't know what he looked like at all. They just knew him from that song from the Spider-Man soundtrack. Sunflower. Yeah. Just imagine me singing that one because, I don't know, too many thoughts in my head to think of a melody right now. But yeah, the new generation is going to have to diversify a little bit where we find an audience, but also more importantly, where we find funding. All right, before I get too far down that rabbit hole, let's talk about sport kilt. I have worn sport kilt my entire career. I mean, that's the best testimonial I can give you right there. I am pretty much constantly in search of the thing that will help me do my hobbies and the things I do better, and I'm willing to invest in those things if they're good. I bought sport kilt at the beginning of my career. I buy sport kilt now. That's it. It's durable. It's light. It resists all the ridiculous dirt and stains and all the stuff that come along with doing a Highland Games, and it looks awesome. one of the things I really love about it, I posted about this recently, that Sport Kilt, because of the amazing variety of tartans and styles, you can make it a form of personal expression for you. It doesn't just have to be like everybody else's kilt. But I wear the Henderson tartan to represent her family, and then I just lay the thing out with patches that represent other things that are important to me. But, you know, at the top of that, the patch sewn on there from the company is Sport Kilt. And that's pretty cool because that's something I really do believe in. That is a company that's been down for the sport of Highland Games and this culture from the get-go. If you go to sportkilt.com to get your kilt, get your look, get yourself looking right how you want to when you compete, you use code HEAVYLIGHT, all one word, you're going to save 10% on that purchase. Go get them. This new generation has to think differently about where funding is going to come from. Also, not just where the audience is. You have to think about what your new sponsors are going to be, where they're going to come from. It's not as easy as I make it sound, though, because you come back to that whole argument of finding and getting a return on investment for people. Like, what is, you know, if you start, like, what's for a clothing company or for a company that makes, you know, hiking gear? Like, what is their return on investment possibly for sponsoring a sport like this? I don't have the answer for you. I do think that there are a lot of things coming down the pipe in Highland Games right now that give us a lot of potential. I do think what Hayden with Fraternity of Girth is doing with highlandgames.org, I think the fact that he's putting out a new, fresh database for us, I think is huge. I like what the guy with Cabermetrics is doing, where he's kind of scraping and looking and making interesting reports and graphs about our sport to kind of show us our growth, because those are shareable. Those are things that help. Those are things that, you know, can put things, wrap things in a nice bow. And, you know, having a database where that stuff like Hayden is doing, that you can go find results and do this, I think those are good. You know, I think one thing that is eluding us, and I've been on the forefront of this, is trying to find a way to stream the sport live. And I've come to this conclusion. I think we need to let that go a little bit. I don't think we are at the stage where there's a big enough audience that want to see this done live. Because how long do the Highland Games take? At least 5 hours. Like in Scotland, they do it fast. They can be done 3 or 4 hours, but it's still 3 or 4 hours with a lot of time in between. And the throws are pretty quick. They take a couple seconds, and then there's a lot of walking around and waiting in between. I don't think that we are a live stream ready sport. I think the live stream is for us. I think as athletes, we enjoy watching it, so we can kind of, because we know what's going on in the field, and we like to relate, and we like to see what people in other parts of the country or the best in the world, whatever they're doing, we like to see it. But I think it's more worth anybody's time to put together a produced package, get the footage, spend some time editing that, and get it out days to a week later. And start packaging that so you can have sponsors be part of it, so you can pace it how you want, you can hit the highlights, you know, you can have commentary either done live, or you can have commentary added after the fact, these are all ESPN's tricks. You know, like a lot of, when you watch the Cornhole National Championships on ESPN, the Ocho or whatever, they're not like right there commenting, like doing live commentary. Sorry, they're not. You'll notice that that footage is heavily edited, but yet the commentary never cuts. Like it's always like right on pace with what's being seen on the screen. And that's part of the magic. That's okay. I think authenticity is important, but I think if we're trying to put together, look, I play the Highland Games. I do the sport. I compete in them. And it's hard for me to watch a 3-hour broadcast of hammers. It is. Like, there's other things I'd rather spend my time on than that. Sorry. I love the sport. But if you can give me a 7-minute video that shows the throws with the hammer, like the top 3 and who's competitive, or who the big throws popping out there, or who did a surprising performance, I'm going to watch that. So I was and still am part of HG Live, which was a YouTube channel that tried to do a lot of live streaming. And you know what the most popular videos on that channel are? The ones we did from the Arnold Sports Festival with the pros, where we'd cut it out event by event, and we keep them at like 10 minutes or less because we edited them and I did commentary after the fact. So there you go. Even amongst our own, that's the most popular style of watching it, instead of going back and watching a live stream. The live stream, keep it to your cell phones, keep it to, whatever you have on the ground that day, share it amongst your friends. I think that's cool, but I don't think that's the future. I think everybody needs to get away from that a little bit. That's just my personal thought on that, but I also think my personal thought is right, because it's backed up by data and things that have happened. And the logistics of live streaming an event are really hairy. I'll tell you that, having done it, having managed it, it's hairy because you have a lot of conditions and it takes a lot of money to have the personnel and the equipment that can withstand all the variables that happen. So that's my quick thoughts on that. Look, let's do this. Let's get into the stuff y'all actually want to talk about, like the real dirt, the real controversy. And I do air quotes around controversy because it's like 7 people agree, 6 people disagree. What a controversy in this massive sport that we have. I kid, but look, here's the stuff. Look, okay, quick hitters. Drug testing. Ooh, there it is. Drug testing makes us look silly. I'm sorry. It makes you, if you were somebody that strongly advocates for it, I know you don't realize it because you're coming from a pure place and you really do care. I understand it, but from the outside looking in, it's silly. It makes you look silly because there's better ways to spend our money and our effort right now. And maybe forever. Because look, I've said it a million times. We're not going to be as big as CrossFit. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have that kind of money on the line. It is not going to happen. Otherwise, you just have to turn it into track and field. You have to turn it into throwing events, and that's already happened. So there you go, and they're tested. Go there. It just makes you look silly, especially when you test amateur athletes who paid out of their own pocket to travel there and then paid an entry fee to go throw and be your entertainment for the day. I'd like to repeat all that. I just can't remember what I said. That's a big deal to me, testing amateur athletes in this sport, because what we are doing is that we are paying the athletic director for the privilege to come on the field and be the entertainers that he was contracted or agreed to provide for the festival. That is similar to saying that the bands that are playing whatever Celtic rock hits or anthems you love out there or whatever they're playing, there's always like a bagpipe and one guy with boots that are way too high. That's the equivalent of them paying to play on the stage. They pay the music director or the entertainment director or whoever it is. They pay them for the right to come play. That's what we're doing. And then you're drug testing those people. You're saying, well, hey, for the right to pay to be my entertainment product, you also have to pee in a cup. That makes us look super fucking silly. I'm sorry. Now, testing pros, you can almost make a case for me, but it's still just a bad investment of time and resources. Anybody that's listening to this, I'm assuming you've heard me talk about drug testing before and heard me joke about it. It's a misuse of time and resources. It makes us look silly because this is a sport about spectacle. This is not a sport about high-level competition that spans the world and we're trying to find the absolute best. That's not what this is. This is much more akin to strongman than it is Olympic swimming, so let's get on board with that. Other things I think should be looked at is that model of having amateurs by the droves come pay entry fees to finance what's happening on the field. You know, the classic model in the US, and nobody says this for some reason, like people feel like it's a dirty phrase, but basically what happens a lot of times is that an athletic director they're appointed by a festival or, you know, whatever event it is that they're at. They're either budgeted a fee out of the fund that they have to work with, and usually that fee is not enough. Not enough to do everything they need to do, or not enough to pay a pro class. So where do you get other funds? Sponsorship, for one. You can source your own sponsorship, which is a super cool way to do it, but it's hard for all the reasons that I said before about finding corporate sponsors for games. Or you invite a bunch of amateurs and you have them pay anywhere from $30 to $80, or even more if you're talking about something like the Arnold. You have them pay out of their pocket to come play, and then that money then funds the pro class. So I understand that model. I do get it. I'm not saying abolish that model because sometimes that's necessary, because if you come to a festival and say like, hey, you know, here's what it's going to cost. It's going to cost $5,000 more to get the best pros in the world or more. They're going to tell you, go fuck yourself. You know, go shit in your decorative Scottish hat, whatever those might be called. I don't know. Somebody tell me what those are called. So I'm not saying abolish that model. Here's why I'm saying it runs rampant and it gets out of control. So many fucking athletes on the field. And I say this from love because I have been one of the so many fucking athletes on the field. And there have been times where I should not have been out there entertaining the crowd at the peak time because I suck. Like, that should not be me. You should not do that. But I think what happens a lot of times is that you get I'm sorry, athletic directors out there, but sometimes some of you, I think, have gotten greedy to where you realize, well, I know I can run 12 or 15 or 16 in a class, and 12 times 30 is, $360 that I'm getting for running that class. Did I do that right? Yeah, I did. Yes, fucking math whiz on this. That you get that money over and over again for however many other classes you can fill until people aren't filling them. So you take everybody you can, you don't set limits. What happens from the outside looking in? Here's what your product looks like. And I know that you can't realize this because I've been an athletic director. I've been an athlete. You're too busy to think about this, to sit in the stands and look at your product. There is an army of people on that fucking field throwing every event all the time at every different skill level, and it becomes white noise and static. It becomes indistinguishable to know who are the pros, who are the A's, who are the B's, all you can tell is men and women, old and young. That's it. That's all you can see out there. That's the only thing you can tell different. Maybe an astute observer that sticks around for more than one event could be like, those guys seem skinnier, or those guys seem like they don't throw as well. Those guys seem older than the other old guys. It creates a lot of static in your event. And that's why the Arnold is fucking cool, because it's one class at a time and everybody pay attention to these guys competing, this short list of people that are competing. So small classes, I'm going to tell you, are pretty much my jam. I love that because a casual observer doesn't have to wait for 12 to 15 throws to come back around to the guy that he was interested in, to come back around to the two girls that were battling it out and you kind of remember their names, but after 15 or 16 throws, who the fuck knows what her name was anymore? It becomes a lot of noise and it makes this harder to watch and it makes it harder to package, but it equals money in the pocket. I get it. The solution that I have found, it really only works for 2-day festivals, but those seem to be fairly normal, is look, Saturday is always going to be a bigger day almost everywhere. Saturday is the day. Saturday is the day for your premier classes. That's the day. Whoever your premier classes are, you assign who they are. You can base it on who the field is, who you know you're going to get, or just generally, if you have a pro class, the pro class goes on Saturday. Have them go on Saturday. Now, some 2-day festivals split the pros across 2, which is smart because you have high quality throwing across 2 days, right? But if you don't have pros, you put those other premier classes, make sure they're going on Saturday when all the people are there. And then on Sunday, you either split that premier class to do their second half stuff or those premier classes to do their second half stuff. But on Sunday, you put in the newer classes or I hate to use the word lower, but let's be honest, we're all adults. The lower skill classes, you put them out there. And sometimes your A class, and I see this in Texas, your amateur A class is not as premier as your master's 40 to 49. How's that? Sometimes the women are fucking monsters and they need to be the ones out there throwing in the premier class. The designation doesn't matter. Pro's the only one you can really say like, okay, we got to get our money's worth. And by being pro, you're supposed to bring some guarantee of quality of your throwing, right? That's the idea. You were a professional athlete. But I don't care who the premier class is. It's not going to, look, I'll tell you this. It's not going to be amateur B and C. It's not going to be the novice and it's not usually, this is hard because I'm biased. It's not usually the lightweights, but nowadays you are going to have some very elite lightweight classes that should be the show. Arnold's going to have a lot of really good lightweights. At the Arnold, we're going to have good lightweights, so we're getting a pretty good spot. But everybody's good at the Arnold, so I don't know. It's a fucking wash. But you have to take those classes that are paying the way, for your pro class or paying the way for the festival to keep going, but they're not exactly a draw. Put them on Sunday. Limit the number of them so there's not 50 million and it gets lost in a sea of kilts and stumbles and screams. Put those non-premier classes on Sunday, give them a chance to compete in front of a crowd, have the fun, do the thing they're going to do. But if you're trying to put a product on the field, put your premier class out there. Now, here's a personal view that I have, which is completely independent of financial worries and all that kind of stuff in my little fantasy world. Whoever your premier class is or classes are, you don't make them pay. Yeah, they work for you. How's that? You don't make them pay. Or if you have the ability to, you even pay them. Because you know what the difference between a pro and an amateur is in North America? Literally just who says they're pro and amateur. If you get handed money, okay, you just got handed money that day. I'm sorry, that's like I said, that's my personal belief. That's my personal opinion. I think if you are an amateur A athlete and you guys are absolute killers, you could be called a super A, your whole class could, and you're dropping bombs and you're entertaining and you're the main draw that day, you shouldn't pay an entry fee. Yeah, how you like that? I think the premier class should be seen as an entertainment product and not seen as a school to fund, a school of learning to throw that's funding the other classes. I don't think it should be seen that way. And I don't think, look, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to pay entry fees. I think that would be great if festivals put enough money and faith into the athletic directors in the sport, but they don't. And the track record isn't there that we're going to make them a ton of money. Sorry, it's not. Most of the time, our sport is not going to be the thing that draws revenue. You know what does? Food and beer. And people buying spots to set up their business to sell stuff. That's what's going to do it. So, that's where revenue comes from. That's where tickets come to the door. They make their money on tickets. And traditionally, it's a mix of things. Just us, we've proven, is not enough to sell tickets, except for in the case of Celtic Classic, which is a good model for somebody that wants to do something that's very based around just the heavy athletics. I think that's a great model. That's one to follow. But in general, I think when you don't have that kind of funding and that kind of infrastructure, I think you need to look more maybe towards what I'm saying. I'm not an absolute right here, but I think I've had a lot of time to think about it and put some ideas together in that. Again, I stick with that model. Even if we take away my thing, like don't charge the top class or whatever. Just put your premier classes where they can be the most visible, and anybody else who's just showing up, learning to throw, or doesn't have the high quality product of throwing, the classes that don't have that, the B's, C's, novices, whoever that class is. Sometimes you're going to have a weak lightweight class. Sometimes you have a weak women's class. Put them on Sunday. So they can still get some shine, they can still have some fun, but they're not going to be the primary product that you're putting out for the biggest crowd. So those are, again, I put a bow on all this by saying those are the things that I think the next generations of athletic directors should be looking at. You shouldn't just be looking to do the same thing the guys did before you because you live in a different world than they did. What those guys, the current generation, guys that are going to retire, the guys that are going to age out, they lived in a different world with a different audience, with a different attention span than you did. So they were doing what was right for the time. It's easy to shit on things that an older guy does as an athletic director now. And that's not my intent. It's easy to shit on those people because it's different than the way I would do it and it doesn't mesh anymore. But for 30 years, I bet it worked the majority of the time. And that's why that game exists, and that's why they continue to carve out that niche. Ed Cosner in San Antonio has kept the San Antonio Highland Games afloat amidst all storms, all tempests, everything, because he did the things that he thought were best. Now, as he eventually moves on from that, are there things that you can go in and improve? I'm sure there are. And I'm sure Ed will be the first one cheering for you to do it. So don't immediately shit on that last generation. Don't shit on anybody that's organizing the games and doing this out of their own time unless they fucking deserve it. Because let's be honest, we all also know athletic directors that deserve to be shit on and should not be running the games anymore. There you go. There's two sides to that. It's weird. It's like there's good people and there's bad people and there's people just in the middle. Just like any fucking profession or any group of people ever. But if you are interested in being the next era of athletic director, you don't need to reinvent everything. You don't need to change the world. Because again, this is a sport rooted in tradition. You have to be aware of that. But you also need to bear in mind that there are some ideas coming out of the athlete base, the festivals. Maybe even look at what some of the other attractions, like the music, like the pipe bands, like the dancers are doing. Look at the things that they're doing that keep them relevant. And let's start working on that too. Because final kind of thought here, this is something where I have failed most of my career, and I would like to see a new generation of athletes and athletic directors get on board with this. All those other entertainers at the games, the aforementioned, the pipe and drum, even the sheepdog people, God. And that one's hard for me to say, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The sheepdog people and the dancers, all the people that are the entertainment product, why don't we do more to support them? Because we're so caught up in our shit and that we're important and that I get my shine and that I feel like I'm a star and that I can post this on Instagram, that you forget that you're one among many products out there that's getting tickets through the fucking gate. And could you imagine what it would do if we as a sport all collectively decided, hey, when we're not competing, let's go watch the dancers and cheer for them and shake their hand and say hi to the families and support them and talk about them on the microphone instead of just what we're doing. What do you think that would do? Maybe, because that's also generally a younger demographic that's doing the dancing, maybe that would say, like, you know what? Those people that do the games are pretty fucking cool. They're always pretty nice to us. What can we do? Maybe we can show some recognition. Maybe we, after we're dancing, we go out and we watch and we cheer for them. So that's something I have personally failed at, and I would like to do better. I would like to reach out to the other people on the field, at the festival, wherever we are, the entertainers, and connect with them, because we're all there for the same thing. We're all there to get recognition, to get some validation, to do the things that we love, to compete, and get the chance to be in front of a crowd and get applause. And maybe if this is keep the culture alive, keep the heritage alive, if that's what you're into. Whatever reason you're in it for, I guarantee you there's somebody that's doing dance, that's doing pipe, that's doing sheepdog, that's doing it for your reason too. Whether it's your cultural heritage, whether it's athleticism, whether it's praise, whether it's the approval of their dad, all those sort of things. Somebody's out there doing it for the same reason as you. So reach across the aisle, reach across the festival ropes, go find those people, and let's, instead of being 3, 4, 5 separate things all doing their thing and bitching about who gets more time on the field, let's maybe think about being a coalition out there. And then maybe let's take that, if we start moving into fitness, strength sports expos, maybe we can be fans of the other people that are out there doing strongman, bodybuilding, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting. Maybe we show up looking like idiots in our kilts, but we make sure it's known like, hey, those Scottish folks, the people doing the Scottish Highland Games, the caber flipping shit, they support everybody. They're fucking cool people. They're down for everybody. Maybe we do that. That's a personal failing on my part. So instead of me fixing myself, I'm putting it all on you. My hopes are pinned on you. I'm doing the same thing I do to my kids. Look, I'm a total failure, so I'm going to put all the pressure on you guys to succeed where I failed. I don't see what could go wrong. Heavy Light is brought to you by Throw Bros. Throw Bros is the only online store for Highland Games athletes. Gear up, get throwing. Use code HEAVYLIGHT, all one word. You're going to save 10% at throwbros.com.